And a number of questions spring up. How should these revelations by André de Ruyter be handled? Did Pravin Gordhan have a duty to disclose what the former CEO told him? And why would Pravin Gordhan frown upon de Ruyter's revelations when he celebrated Mcebisi Jonas speaking out against state capture? We are joined now by Angelo Fick. He is from the Auwal Socio-Economic Research Institute. Mr. Fick, thank you very much for your time. Let's start with that first question. How should these revelations by André de Ruyter be handled?
Well, good morning, Claudia, and to your listeners or viewers. My concern around this is that a lot of people are playing organizational or individual defense politics, and there are duties that and obligations that apply to everybody involved. Mr. de Ruyter himself, his superiors in the various ministries, as well as the various DGs that are involved in running the portfolio for energy. There is the Municipal Finance Management Act. There is the Public Finance Management Act. There are various pieces of legislation around corruption. And having just gone through the Phala Phala scandal, one would imagine that for many people, including those commenting, like Minister Gordhan and various other officials inside the ANC, they will be familiar with the requirement to report issues that are criminal, that exceed certain amounts of money, to the Priority Crimes Division. And Mr. de Ruyter himself making the allegation that up to a billion rand goes missing from Eskom, on a regular basis. The question is, did he report these things to his superior when he became aware of them? When did they become aware of this? And do the prosecuting authorities of South Africa know about this? And are there ongoing investigations by the criminal justice system into this? Or are these simply allegations that are being flung back and forth between people who have had a falling out? And that would be unacceptable.
Yeah. Some people are probably asking themselves the question, if Pravin Gordhan, a man recently celebrated for being at the forefront of fighting state capture, today says he could not act on quote-unquote allusions by André de Ruyter. The question here is Pravin Gordhan saying this genuinely so that he did not have any more information and therefore he could not act on insinuations or allegations, and therefore he needed possibly something much more substantive? Or is this about the preservation of the party he belongs to and those at the very top?
So this is a question that arose at the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture, specifically in relation to then Deputy President, now President Cyril Ramaphosa, what he knew, when he knew it, and how he acted on this. So again, the question is not whether or not these are merely allegations. If the allegations are coming from the Chief Executive Officer of a state-owned enterprise, it is the duty of the state to investigate those allegations and either disprove them, thereby showing up the competence or incompetence of, among other things, the particular person, or to follow up and have those investigated in order to show that this is indeed the case. Now, again, there seem to be parallel processes in South Africa that several people in prominent positions want. There is what the law requires of them to do, and then there is this kind of posturing around what they are or aren't allowed to do. If Minister Gordhan was indeed powerless to follow up on allusions or allegations, surely he must have lost any faith he had in a CEO who couldn't back up allusions or allegations with evidence. Secondly, if the CEO is making these kinds of allusions and allegations without evidence, the competence of that CEO must be brought into question. Now, I'm saying this not about Mr. de Ruyter or Mr. Gordhan specifically. I'm saying this is the case that should apply to whoever these individual personalities are. And too often in South Africa, we're being asked to make choices between people based on whether we think of them as heroes or villains. And actually, we should be making these decisions about people based on whether they followed the rules required of them in law in South Africa or not. If they didn't follow the rules required of them in law, then they are not the right people for the positions that they are currently inhabiting.
Yeah. Angelo, if you could just give me a little bit more of your time, I'd like to play a particular soundbite from Minister Gordhan, and this is what he says is still his stance on corruption. Let's just take a listen for a moment.
my intolerance for corruption continues. And to whatever extent one can combat it or encourage others to combat it, I will continue to do so, not just as an individual, but as a national mission that we have to accomplish for ourselves.
It was a short bite, and I hope you were able to hear it, Mr. Fick. Minister Gordhan says his intolerance of corruption still continues. Are people justified to be puzzled by the manner in which he is now speaking seemingly against the actions of the actions of André de Ruyter? Just the action of speaking out. Pravin Gordhan, I think I seem to remember him correctly during state capture saying, it is time to speak out against these things. By the way, nothing has been proven yet, unless, of course, you can tell me different around state capture. So Pravin Gordhan, not so long ago, was happy to tell the country that something is going wrong within the state architecture, the public, the government architecture, and so something has got to be done. Today, is he talking a different language?
Well, Mr. Gordhan is probably best placed to explain if there is a disparity between, views he espoused 4 or 5 years ago and views that he currently holds. What I think must be borne in mind is that this movement of responsibility from one person to the other is unacceptable by all the players involved. If Mr. Gordhan says Mr. de Ruyter never raised these issues of corruption that he's now currently airing in public with him as the Minister of Public Enterprises, that is something that he would then have to say, that this is the first he hears of these allegations. If this is a matter, as he seems to point out in the first clip that you played, that this is something unacceptable conduct for a CEO, that doesn't take away from the fact that if these allegations by the CEO may be inconvenient, unacceptable in the polite cultures and corridors of corporate South Africa, if they hold true, they actually have to be acted upon. And so the question is not whether Mr. Gordhan says that he stands by corruption, against corruption, that he is intolerant of corruption. The question is, what are the actions by all of the individuals involved in government, in cabinet, by the various public servants at the DG level and below, when these allegations arose? Did they do due diligence of following up on this? Because we know this is the culture of tolerance for corruption, where people speak out against something, but they don't follow up that speaking out with actions. And in South Africa, what we need increasingly are actions. And we know that actions carry massive risks. This is a country in which whistleblowers are constantly under threat, in which people have died for speaking up. So it's one thing to say that you're willing to speak up. It's another thing to say to actually do the work that is required of you once that speaking up happens. So here the question is, did all of these officials in government follow the due process of what is required under the Priority Crimes Division around the legislation around corruption, what you report, what you're required to report, and how it is that public officials who are elected can now simply point fingers at somebody else instead of, one, going about actually disproving this person's allegations if they are untrue, or two, showing that they've acted on these allegations by following the law, the letter of the law and the spirit of the law, to protect South Africa from further exploitation. And that, I think, is a tough ask. If people cannot provide us with what young people call the receipts, their words are not enough. We must demonstrate the actions of what they did when they knew what was going on.
Yeah. Perhaps a much simpler question from my side, Angelo Fick. I tend to get these things cobbled up. Is this an inconvenient truth for the ANC that goes to the very top on the eve of an election?
It may very well be that inconvenient truth. After all, Mr. Ramaphosa came in 2017 and 2018 promising what he called a new dawn. We then lived through the pandemic in 2020, where very many people very close to him were implicated in kinds of corruption that echoed very much what happened in state capture. The Gauteng Department of Health issue around the procurement of PPE, various other forms, the Auditor General indicating at the end of last year that there was all sorts of concerns about the spending of money during the national state of disaster. We've just had a new national state of disaster on energy declared. Will the Auditor General at the end of 2024 have the same kinds of concerns raised then about what we see now? So Mr. Ramaphosa and the African National Congress, ahead of the 2024 election, indeed have a real problem on their hands of having to match actions and words sometimes against people in their own ranks, to convince the electorate that 2024 is not going to be a repeat of 2016 or 2014, where promises are made that are not delivered. And we're a decade on from that 2014 election next year. And the question is, can the ANC convince ordinary South Africans that this time round, having been given yet another chance, they'll behave any differently from how they had before?
Angelo, Fick, thank you very much for that crisp analysis. Thanks indeed for your time. And it reminds me, in fact, of a question that was, in fact, a statement that was made by the President not so long ago, that the ANC, when it comes to corruption, is accused number one. So, perhaps the shoe does fit.